And we're recording. So, Marmoset Toolbag, pretty bare bones 3D view and manipulator. So, this is my material view. This would be where I change my material settings. This is where I change functionality on any object or component I have selected for a scene, camera, whatever else. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load in an object into my scene. So in this case, I'm going to load in my let's load in scenes. Let's load in the that face I did. Zelda face statue mesh. There it is. Okay, so here he is, but it's a little too smooth. It's missing his textures. So what we need to do is actually load in our proper textures in our scene. So what we're going to do is we have our Lambert 1, our default here. What we can do is we can create a new material from scratch. So I'm going to create a new material. I can double click it and call it Face Statue Matte. There we go. So the names are a little different in terms of what it's looking for. Right now it's looking for under surface. It like categorizes stuff in weird ways or like different from what you're used to. So under surface, it's asking for a normal map. So I'm going to load in my normal map. Yes, albedo would be color. In this case, I did save out under substance, painter, textures, and I made a specific folder and exported textures out for Marmoset Toolbag because the Unreal export options, remember, it packs your textures together. So you have to do another export out if you're using Substance Painter Designer, making sure that you have those individual maps as target files. So as TGA files. So Zelda face statue, and in this case I'm going to pull up this is the normal map, right, that I'm looking for?
Yes.
Yep. Normal. It's not doing anything because I didn't assign it to our object yet. So you can just click and drag from the material to the object. Yay.
Amazing.
Amazing. Wow. The word of the day is marmoset. Yay. Pee-wee's Playhouse, come on.
We've done this before.
I know we've done this before, but the word of the day is marmoset. Yep. All right. Next is the microsurface. So this one kind of screwed me up for a little bit, but this is the roughness map. This is controlling the microsurface of this thing.
You have to change like very many things.
Let's see. There we go. Roughness. Here we go. It changes very slightly. You can always change the amount of it or even invert it here. Or invert it here. Under the albedo, again, that is a color map. So under Substance Painter, that is the base color. And then for the reflectivity, that is your metallic map.
Wow, amazing.
Metallic. So things are super dark right now.
Of course, it's metallic.
So also one more thing that we need is our ambient occlusion map. So under occlusion down here, you click on it and the arrow to the side marks occlusion. You load it in. Ayo, there we go. Now again, it's very dark in our scene. We need to add some lights. So to add lights in our scene, and also just to let you guys know that you can add additional maps for emissive, transparency, or even up here for subdivision or height, if you needed an extra extruded surface. So to give you an idea of what the height might look like, let's do as PN triangles, displacement, set to height. We're going to load in, I think this guy has a height map on him, just to show you what it might look like. It's going to be crazy. Yeah. So this is kind of what happens with a height map. In this case, it's like kind of a bare bones one. So this is the amount of tessellation on it under the subdivision tab. A lower amount of tessellation means that it can't properly interpret the height. Because what a height map is doing is like adding additional tessellation on top of it and it kind of pushing it out in a, it's called a parallax map. It's giving the fake sense of depth based on black and white values. This is separate from a normal or a bump map, whereas those are just kind of surface details. The polygon's still flat. This is adding additional geometry on top, but faking it using a black and white map. But you have to tell the computer, okay, we'll add extra tessellation on top of it and change the overall scale of it if I need to. Now, this is not the best example because my height map doesn't really do all that much and it's really pointy. However, it works well for any, like your substance designer stuff. Like you're trying to push out those bricks, this is how you show that. But I'm just going to turn this off because I don't need it.
That last one was for Ben.
That's for most of you guys using Substance Designer. So adding or checking out some of these buttons here, we can change stuff in our render, our overall scene here. So on the gearbox next to render, we can change stuff like setting its own ambient occlusion. We can set GI for global illumination. We can set our camera settings here. Our skybox, we can change our skybox. This is the actual mesh itself, or this is the group and this is the mesh that's in there. But again, I want to create a light. So I'm going to click this little light bulb right here. Guys, if you want to show your scenes in a very professional manner, I suggest you pay attention and not play on your phones. So I created a light. By default, it creates a spotlight, and it's facing from the camera direction. So, you know, you can actually see the edges of the spotlight. But if we're doing like a normal 3-point lighting setup, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create directional lights instead, where you can change the type of light right here under directional. So right here, and you can rotate your light, move it over, and change the overall brightness and intensity if you want, and change the overall tone or value of the color. So let's make like an orangey light, a little bit more on the whiter side. Okay, cool. I'm going to duplicate this light, Control D. You can rotate this guy over. In this case, I might do like a purplish light. Okay. And then make another one for my backlight. And let's make this like really bright, like cyan almost. And let's point it just at the back here to kind of give it that edge detail.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's too powerful.
So this kind of gives you that nice edge detail around it. So what we can then do, we have our 3 different lights. We can then create, let's say, a different camera. Right now I'm only looking through one camera. If you press this icon for new camera, I can then change this camera settings and leave this one independent. So our main camera can be all the way over here. It's fine. I can switch over to camera 1, and then that one's set in place. I can then change stuff like our focus distance, our or depth of field, near blur, far blur. It'd probably work better if I had more stuff in here.
So basically, using the focus settings,
You can do kind of depth of field effects on it to make it.
basically mess with the composition of what you're looking at.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm looking through
Like
camera one.
professional shots.
Yeah, you do like nice blur depth of field if you're like trying to focus somebody's arm coming towards the camera. You're gonna keep that in focus, and then or different levels of focus and different things.
That's cool.
Tone mapping, sharpening, if you want for your camera, or bloom.
Oh god.
jeez.
So it's Days of Our Lives filter.
Cool, right?
The bold and the pretty cool.
The bold, yeah. A vignette over an image.
The focus.
Overall film grain. It's a little too strong.
Hate the grain.
Yeah, the grain's not great. I'll turn that off. Actually, I think it's set to 0. Yeah. Okay. So with that, we can then add. This is called a shadow catcher. If I wanted to catch shadows on the ground, create that, and it'll catch shadows on the ground. It will be transparent in our render.
The holdout from last year.
Exactly, it's a holdout. And you can change its settings, change its overall opacity if you wanted to. I don't need it. I'm going to delete it.
Yeah, no,
You can add in fog in our scene.
oh, that's dope. Very spooky.
Dopage.
Oh, spooky.
Cool.
Yeah.
Actually,
I never use it. Delete.
What did that do?
It adds just a fog to our overall fog to our scene.
do a forest and put something.
So your Silent Hill filter.
Exactly.
Your silent
yes.
filter.
Yep.
A little too strong.
A little too strong. One of the main things that you can do is you can also bake stuff within here instead of using XNormal or Substance Painter. You can also bake in here. So you can bake your normals, height, position, curvature, all of this other stuff within Marmoset if you really wanted to. Never used it before, so I'm not going to show you guys. You can experiment with it.
See how it works out better.
Yay, bring stuff.
But if you are doing, if you want to have a actual video file of your asset rotating around a particular point, you guys remember the turntable, right? You can create a turntable in here using this button, new turntable. So it is turning. There's nothing attached to it. So you notice how your hierarchy right here, it's all kind of even. There, stuff. It looks kind of like your outliner window. For something to be parented to this, you actually have to drag it onto it. So I'm going to drag my camera, lights, and mesh to this turntable. And let's just play. Whoops. Spacebar will go full screen. You can just press play here. Oh, don't put the camera in it. Right. Don't have the camera attached to it. I forgot. There we go. That's better.
That nice.
So right now it's doing it 300 frames at 30 frames per second at a speed of 1. You can change all of that stuff down here. It's pretty simple to do.
That's cool.
Let's say I wanted to show off something like my wireframe. We want to show off our wireframe, right? We want to see how this thing is actually constructed. So if you go under your render settings up here, turn on wireframe, you can actually turn it on. Change the amount of it. You can change the color of it.
Where it kind of blends.
There you go. So nice way to show off our wireframe or construction history. So sometimes what I do is I make a new material. Let's just do this. I'll duplicate this guy. And I'll call this face statue matte. Wait, this one. Face statue wire mat. And I'm going to remove all this other stuff. I remove the albedo. Okay. Remove the... Yeah, essentially a matte cap on it. Let's turn off the gloss map. There you go. Or is it microsurface? Oh, come on, man. Gloss. Cool. And I just changed the color of it. The, is it under diffusion? Where's albedo? Oh. It hid from me. We can just change the overall color if we wanted to. Let's put it more of a kind of base gray or something a little bit lighter. But you can show off that way. But I'm going to put my other guy back on. Go to my render, turn off wireframe. You can set on local ambient occlusion or camera-based ambient occlusion. Change your occlusion strength if you wanted to. Doesn't seem to be doing much right now. Oh, it's a little bit. Just the occlusion scale had to be turned up. It's subtle, but it's there. Enable GI for global illumination. GI is the amount of light bouncing off of different objects to help color our scene. Change our overall brightness of our GI. So it's catching, it's bouncing light off the surface and back onto it. It's kind of casting more rays into our scene. And if you want to use the watermark, you use the Marmoset Toolbag to kind of shill for Marmoset. Change its overall position if you wanted to.
Custom watermarks?
No, the watermark is specifically for Marmoset.
It's like, yeah.
It's like, yeah, I made this in Marmoset.
Well, if you take a screenshot on that, you can just go in Photoshop and
So, next part is looking at the skybox. So I can actually change my overall lighting here. Change the overall brightness if I want the backdrop to be blurred out. Or I can even say use a different image. So right now our render is using, where's our background? You can change it to an overall image that you import in for your lighting. So you can change a preset up here, and it gives you a pretty nice selection of presets. So this one, I believe I chose Forest Path. That gave me a nice lighting scenario that I liked. And you can change like where the light is actually coming from by clicking and saying, that's my sun, or that's a point of light that's shooting into my scene. So right now, the mode is set to backdrop. It's set to ambient sky. If you do blurred sky, it's kind of using that image from behind here. But that's still a little too busy. If you prefer, you can actually set it to just a single color. If you click on it and set it to just the pure sky, or you can set it to a single color here, and it's using this color right here, and this is all under the sky scenario here. But I usually like to bring this into Photoshop anyway, and export out a render. So under Edit, Preferences is where you can actually change where it's going to output to, because otherwise it will save out to your desktop. So you actually need to change the path of where your output will save to. In this case, I set it to like a Marmoset folder. I can go under Capture. If I change my settings, I can change my image sampling here. So right now it's set to 1920 by 1080. Sampling at 16 times, that's fine. Format, it's by default set to PNG. It's not going to save your transparency well if you save out as a PNG. So what I suggest you do is save out as a Targa file and turn on transparency. For a video, it'll ask you if you want to save out a video file as well. with transparency or not. You can save out an H.264 video if you're doing our turntable, or you can actually set out as a target or PNG sequence that you can then bring into something like After Effects. So once you do that, hit OK. I can go to capture image or capture video. If I go to capture image or hit F11 and go to that folder, okay, Marmoset Toolbag, screenshots, and it should be the very last one right here. It's thinking about opening it. There we go. Brought in our screenshot. There is no background on it because I set it to be using transparency. But there is no transparency on this image, you would say. Guess where it's held? Alpha channel. Channels, Alpha 1. I can hold down Control and click on this layer, or I can right click. Nope. Alt is best. I can Control click on this to make a selection of it, and then Control J to make a new layer. And now I have transparency. And then I can use this with my own like composition and arrange it with another image if I wanted to. And this is how I would show off my render of my object. Yep. And I might even do another one with like the wireframe render, and then put that in here as well. So again, I'm showing off with my materials, and I'm showing off also my construction using wireframe turned on. So any other questions about that? About using Marmoset, about showing off our models, showing off the goods, so to speak?
Pretty straightforward.
Cool. So that's pretty straightforward. Good, then should have no reason why we shouldn't have nice pretty renders by the end of this project, right?
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, because everybody has it installed. We're all going to be using it. Cool. So that's how we worry about presentation. So you guys work on your projects, and I'll walk around and see where you're at.